Hello, story seekers. I'm Ben.
I'm Nico, and you're listening to The Tiny Bookcase.
For this showcase episode, we are joined by Britain's most respected living horror writer.
The Washington Post described his work as one of the monumental accomplishments of modern popular fiction, and we feel extremely privileged to be speaking with him today.
We would like to welcome Ramsey Campbell.
Hello, Ramsey.
Gentlemen, thank you for having me.
Well, I think the honour's all ours on that one. Yeah, thank you for your thanks.
I'm not often accused of being a gentleman.
Well, revel in it.
I can write it in the calendar. It doesn't happen very often at all.
When somebody asks you if you're a gentleman going forward, you can say, Ramsey Campbell called me a gentleman.
Yeah, according to a very well-respected writer, I am.
So you must get this question all the time, Ramsey. So I'm just going to pop it in right at the top, and then we can get past it. We can just move past it. If you had one sort of key piece of advice to give for aspiring writers, what would it be?
Finish what you write, basically.
Finish
yeah, and know that you can always rewrite. No matter how bad it feels while you're doing it, that's not the end. If you feel it's not satisfactory, well, rewriting is your friend. And the only trick I've learned in like more than 60 years of doing it is, for me, is always compose in your head at least the first sentence before you sit down to write. And then you're not staring at this horrible blank that's staring back at you. And once you've written one sentence, more will follow.
Hell yeah. Do you sometimes find that that doesn't necessarily stay the first line? Or is that...
Often in the rewrite, gosh, yes, oh yeah. I mean, in fact, part of the process of writing is sorting out what works from what does not work. And so, I always kind of work a little bit on the next session's opening and the material that's likely to be in the next session's writing. And I may do this, let's say at the end of today's. But then tomorrow morning when I get up, or even before I get up, because I'll be lying in bed there musing and contemplating, I may decide, well, no, actually that doesn't quite work. It's going to have to be something different. So it's a constant process of sorting out the material, for what is worth keeping and what is worth substituting.
I love the bit of advice that it's just finish what you write, because then you've got the material to be able to separate it. Like that's the process. It has to happen. Yeah, totally get it. Great advice.
It sounds super active as well. It sounds lovely to be sort of writing in your head before you've even departed pillow and duvet. That's
well, that's what gets me up, you see. I'm lying there thinking, oh God, I've lost it. It's no good. It never was any good. And if I ever knew what I'm doing, I don't know, and I've got no ideas. And then a sentence will come along, and I think, oh God, I better get up and scribble that down, or record it on the phone so I don't forget it. Because one thing that's another thing actually, and I disagree with certain friends of mine, noted writers with whom I won't name. But as far as I'm concerned, never think I'll remember that when I get up. Always note it down, because half the time you'll forget it. And as far as I'm concerned, it's always worth, even if you discover later on it wasn't worth having after all, at least you've got it. Whereas otherwise, as far as I'm concerned, I lie there for hours thinking, God, I've forgotten it, what was it? And occasionally I can get it back again, but very often, I don't do that often, but when I do, I probably can't.
Oh man, that's such good insight. I'm going to do that from now on, because I do occasionally just try and trust that I'm going to remember that line. And
well, you can sort of work out some sort of mnemonic way of doing it, maybe, or just a couple of words out of the sentence to remind you. But that doesn't always work in my experience.
Gosh, I feel like we could just drill all the way into that and just keep going. Yeah. But let's. Nico, I think you had a question that you wanted to ask at the time.
I do. I specifically wanted to ask you, Ramsey, because you are a man who knows horror, who knows fear.
Right.
What is scarier? Is it the great expanse of space or the unplumbed depths of our own oceans?
Or the unplumbed depths of our own minds, I would add in there, actually.
No, that's way too much. That's too much for me.
Yeah, well, there you are. You see, no, I think between space and the mind, I find the ocean probably more reassuring because I think it's a place of great wonder, whereas the other two, I suspect, are places of potential terror.
That's a perfect
Yeah, I
answer.
can't argue with
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Gosh. Well, story seekers, those listening, today we are showcasing the work of our guest, Ramsey Campbell. So, Ramsey, would you like to tell us a bit about the story first, with a bit of context, or do you want to just launch straight in?
I'll just tell you for the moment where to find it if you want to read it, and
Cool.
the only place you can find it is it's Severin Films in America. They've now done two splendid box sets of folk horror movies, and this is on the second set, All the Haunts Be Ours, Volume 2. And they have done this wonderful hardcover book that goes in the slipcase with Kim Newman and me and lots of other guys, and they're all new stories in some way folk horror. I've got to say it's possibly true, and I'm not sure. People would have to check up on this. I've looked on Amazon just today, and it looks to me as if it may be separately available, the book. You don't have to buy the Blu-ray set as well, but you'd be well advised to buy the Blu-ray set because it's got lots of great stuff and a lot of very rare stuff on it. So if I were you, buy the whole bundle.
Excellent.
Can't argue with that. I think more Blu-rays should come with free books.
Well,
that
yes.
sounds awesome, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, would you care to launch into the tale?
I shall indeed, and it is called Stick in the Mud. As Scott reached the brow of West Kirby, the dawn tried to prise up the basalt sky behind him. Its fierce glare stretched the shadows of 3 islands across the beach towards the distant sea. The sight inspired him to drive down to the promenade where scattered cars were parked. A few hectic dogs and their sedate owners were celebrating the desertion of the beach. A dark, shrill cloud of birds sailed up from the sand as a hound dashed at them. Scott leaned on the chilly railing barnacled with dew and watched a woman stumble at speed down the nearest concrete ramp, tugged by a pair of dogs so lengthy they looked protracted by a widescreen lens. She unleashed them to race toward the islands, rousing an explosion of birds, and it occurred to Scott that he had never attempted the celebrated walk across the beach. He was making for the ramp when a voice said, "Excuse me, do you have a plan?" Her silhouette overtook him before she did, pointing an elongated shadow finger at him. It belonged to a walking stick, which she leaned on at once. Her aged face looked shrunk against the bone, but her eyes glittered with liveliness. He thought he saw grains of wind-blown sand in her long hair, which sprawled over the shoulders of a tracksuit, just as grey and somewhat too voluminous for her limbs. Hiking boots, their laces encrusted with mud, completed the outfit. "A map, do you mean?" Scott said. "I'm afraid I haven't got one." This earned, or at least prompted, a faintly pained smile. "Where are you planning to walk?" "Out to Hilbury when I have the chance." "You need to take care of the tides," she said, indicating a signboard beside the ramp. "You saying I shouldn't risk it?" "Not at all. Stride out while you can. Might you welcome company?" Uncertain how much help she might need, Scott postponed answering. "How far is it? I imagine further than it looks." "Just a couple of miles. Not much of a trek for a fit young fellow." "I was only wondering if it might be one for you." "I walk it whenever I'm able. I can tell you some tales as we go," she said, and marched to the ramp. As Scott followed her, the stick dealt the concrete a succession of clacks that made several walkers stare towards him. The stick helped propel her across the sand at a speed he had to stride to match. The sea had strewed innumerable amoeboid remnants of itself along the shore, mirroring the glare the burden of the sky was crushing out of the sun. The woman made straight for the nearest island, tramping through pools while Scott dodged them. Some of the dogs veered towards her, only to scamper inland. "I'm not one for the dogs," she said, dismissing them with a laugh too terse for mirth. "So what brings you here at this hour?" "I was on my way home." "Quite a coincidence. Are you another night bird?" Not usually, and I was working late. What's the task that keeps you up at night? As I say, it doesn't often. A hotel computer system took some fixing, that was all. You sound like the future. I live for the past myself. Fix your bits. That's me. If you have a computer problem, that's the name to look for. I'd say having a computer is the problem. With another blunt laugh, she said, Are people meant to call you Mr. Bits? Scott will do. When her gaze inspected his face while the stick impelled her onwards, he felt required to add, Scott Andrews. I'd like to know who I'm walking with. Do you want a name for me? That sounds like a fair exchange. A bargain for us both, she said, and turned her eyes towards the island, which several minutes striding appeared to have brought no closer. You may as well call me Walker. When she thrust out her hand, he assumed she was seeking support, until he saw it was waiting for a shake. It felt as cold as the railing had, and more withered than it looked. It clung to his, and he began to think she did indeed want help, or was she anxious to urge him onwards? Perhaps her grasp signified concern, because she gave him a frown bordering on the maternal. You won't be too tired for the walk, will you? I did get some sleep. They gave me a room for nothing. I wouldn't want you not to see the island, she said, and released his hand. You deserve some reward for your labours. Scott couldn't tell whether she meant his job. I guess you'll have retired. From life? This provoked a curt laugh. Not for a long time yet, she said. In fact, I'll say never. He supposed she needed the exaggeration to fend off thoughts of her age and its inevitable confusion. Now we go behind the eye, she said. Sorry, how do you mean? The island. She pointed with a stick and then dug it into the beach, splintering some of the massive shells stranded by the tide. Little eye, she said. It was a low sandstone ridge a few hundred yards long. Light escaping from beneath the slab of cloud lent it a glow like a dying coal enlivened by a breath. A sandy wind set its outline twitching, or at least the bristling grass through which the wind hissed. Scott followed his guide around the tip of the island, beyond which the shadow of the ridge spread like oil across the beach. Now we head for Middle Eye, the woman said. This was several times the size of its neighbour and about half as far to reach, across an expanse of sand etched with slivers of the sea. Why are they called that? Scott felt he ought to learn. Perhaps you'll see. A sibilant wind snaked through the ragged turf that crowned the second islet, and Scott might have fancied some species of creature had been roused to crawl too flat to be seen through the grass. You said you were going to keep me informed, he protested. I did say something of the kind. Beyond the far end of the islet, birds pecked at their shadows as if to tack them to the sand. They flew up at her approach, and their shadows swelled before growing faint and draining into the beach. Birds as well? At least some people trust me, she said with a hint of wistfulness. What are you wanting to know? I don't know much at all about the islands, to be honest. Few people remember what counts anymore. She jerked the stick up to indicate the final island, which stretched double the length of its closer companion and stood more than twice as tall. It said Hilbury was named after St. Hildburg, she told Scott, whether or not she was real. Don't you think she was? I know a woman lived there all alone many centuries ago, the 7th to be precise. They must have believed in her over there in West Kirby. The Victorians built her a church. And now the town was so remote that the pallid houses on the promenade resembled a rind of ice edging the beach. What was supposed to have made her a saint? Scott felt he might as well ask. Perhaps devoting herself to protecting the unwary. I said she lived alone. I should have said she wished she was. There was life on the island long before her time, but it had no name. The island, you mean? Say that if you like. Before Scott could deny any preference, she said, 300 years later they established a monastery. You might think it was meant to take her place. Scott had a different thought. Were you a lecturer? When this brought him a wordless look, he tried saying, a historian? I'm what I've always been. Too swiftly to invite another question, she said, after the dissolution of the monasteries, they left 2 monks there to keep watch. Their task was meant to be maintaining a beacon for ships. Scott blinked at the miles of beach around him. I wouldn't have thought ships could come anywhere near. They did before this side of the river silted up, but you're right to wonder if that was really why the monks were there. Perhaps you see a pattern. He was surrounded by them. She'd escorted him past the landward side of the central island, no longer bothering to use her stick, and they were in the midst of hundreds of slivers of the sea, like gouges left by fingernails clutching at the beach. He had to fend off the impression so as to ponder her words. You said the woman who lived on the island was trying to protect people. What from? Exactly so, his companion said, as if she was praising a pupil's perceptiveness. Once the beacon wasn't needed any longer, the last monks left the island, and the old tales began to be forgotten. Telling them helps keep their topic alive. Is that a good thing, do you think? I'll let you decide. Perhaps some traces of the tales remain. The council has charge of the island, but they can't find anyone to stay there at night. Why are you saying that is? Could it be the owner of the eyes? Scott was starting to lose patience with both her headlong pace and her vagueness. I wouldn't know, unless you know more than you think. Would you have heard tales of the kind as a child? It is as old as humanity, the trickster who lures unwary travellers to their deaths. At least you'll have heard of Will-o'-the-Wisp, who leads them into a marsh. It does sound a bit familiar. Around here the tradition is stick in the mud. You might think that's where the phrase came from. It said they can't cross water, not when the tide is in. It comes in faster than a horse can gallop, as the saying goes. If it strands them on the mainland, they have to wait for somebody to walk with them. It's a good job I didn't know about all that when I met you over there, then. You could have been left on your own. She gave this a frown so fierce it made the centre of her forehead swell. I often am. I'm sorry, I was just playing along with your story. It isn't only mine. You can find variants all over the world. The old man of the sea who clings to you and won't let go until you're dead. That's related too. You're a folklorist, aren't you? Scott roused at last. Forgive me for thinking you'd retired. Of course you'll still be one. Perhaps I simply relate what needs to be told. He thought she sounded more like a folklorist than ever. They'd reached the tip of Hilbury Island, where a narrow sandy road, if not just a path, wound uphill between grassy banks. A pole displayed a stack of notices, in which the lowest announced danger of death, apparently referring to a treacherous aspect of the landscape. That's some welcome, Scott said. They think there's no longer a permanent resident. The woman kept a wry smile up as she said, You won't die here with me. And she elected herself as a successor to Hildburg. On the path she slashed at the banks with her stick as if to drive off any life that might be lurking in the grass. As the path approached the height of the island, the banks subsided, bordering the track with meadows once it emerged into the open. Across the miles of sand, the coast looked squashed to insignificance by the colossal sullen sky. If the microscopic dogs Scott saw dashing to bathe in diminutive impromptu ponds were giving voice, showing the distance should leave them inaudible, yet he thought he heard barking. Does sound travel further here? He said. The woman glanced toward the coast. You could call for help all you liked, but nobody would reach you in time. Help with what? The tide. I told you. So forcefully he could have heard enthusiasm, she said, The mud! The path led past the huddle of whitish houses on the far side of a high fence. The sky released a splittered glare to frame them, wearing their outlines away. Does somebody live there? Scott said. We oughtn't to disturb them. Presumably she was showing consideration for the occupants. He couldn't see into any of the rooms and was more intrigued to locate the barking, which was somewhere ahead. It didn't sound quite like a pack of dogs. A branch of the path led towards it across a turfy plateau that gave way to bare rock at the end of the island. The woman reached the edge ahead of Scott. The slugs are out, he said. He must mean the creatures on the sandbanks beyond the island. He supposed the long, sinuous, glossy black shapes did indeed bear some resemblance, but their baying as they lolled or flopped vigorously about the banks or plunged into the water made it plain they were seals. His companion seemed intent on the scattered watchers with binoculars occupying slabs of rock below the cliff. I'll go down with you, she said. However fit she'd proved to be, he didn't want to put her at risk on the uneven, slippery rocks. I can see from here, he said, and did at length. When it occurred to him that she hadn't responded, he turned to her, but she was nowhere to be seen. Had he offended her by refusing her guidance? He'd accepted plenty, after all. He appeared about in search of her as he returned to the path, but the only signs of life were miles away. Could she have dodged into one of the houses? Against the fierce white blaze, the sky pressed out, the windows stayed opaque. The grassy banks beside the path closed around him, blotting out the faint calls of the seals. As he stepped off the island, the sign about death clattered with the wind that stung his face with sand, making his eyes stream. When it rattled at his back, he couldn't help turning to look, but nobody was behind him. The beach seemed oddly unfamiliar. Presumably the altered angle of the light was emphasizing aspects he hadn't found worthy of notice. Irregular patches of sodden grass sprouted from vast jagged slabs of dun sand, between which misshapen pools shivered with the wind. His outstretched shadow skimmed the sand and snagged the grass and trawled in pools as he headed for the middle island. Beyond its further neighbour, he saw a group of walkers making for the islands until a tiny shout from someone on the promenade called them back. No doubt they'd been warned about the tide. It must be too late to set out, but he'd had ample time to return. Nevertheless, he put on speed across the deserted beach. Wind trampled all the grass that crested Middle Eye, and he could have imagined the island was whispering to him. If it was hiding any secrets, the whisper conveyed none. It fell silent as he hastened past the landward side, and then the only sound apart from his softened footsteps was the shrilling of a flock of birds that soared up behind the smallest island. As he strode, rather did his best to stride, into the open, he saw he'd overlooked one more feature of the beach on his outward trek. It protruded from the sand close to Little Eye, and he took for a mooring, a thin, right-angled post planted on the tip of its shadow that fished in a scrawny pool. Why should it trouble him? As he crossed the sand, he realized what it was, the woman's walking stick. He was wondering whether to retrieve it when he heard her voice. "Is someone there? Can you help?" She was somewhere behind Little Eye. Scott grabbed the stick and made all the haste he could across the obstructive sand. He found her in the shadow of the island, gazing towards the distant walkers on the beach. It wasn't just a shadow, it was a spread of mud in which she'd sunk deeper than her ankles. "Is there anyone coming to me?" Scott heard her plead. "I'm on my way," he shouted, slithering across the waterlogged sand. "Don't move!" She turned her head towards him, and her hair veiled her face as she ducked to indicate her plight. "Can you reach?" "If I can't get you, I'll call somebody who will." He felt ashamed to qualify his undertaking, but his feet had begun to sink into the mud. "I'll be with you, whatever happens," he said. Her head stayed low, and he could have concluded the spectacle of her predicament had robbed her of movement. He ventured another tentative step, only to feel the mud suck his feet inches deep. He was yards away from the woman and faltering shamefully when he saw how to solve the problem. "Here, get hold of your stick," he urged, and extended it towards her at the length of his arm. "It wasn't mine." Before Scott could interpret this, she seized the handle of the stick with such force it brought him stumbling towards her. The mud closed around his ankles as she raised her head. At that moment the sky swallowed the sun, and her face seemed to gather its shape from a flood of darkness. He could have thought she was demonstrating where the islands had derived their names from, as her eyes gleamed like coals at him, as all of them did. He was struggling to stagger backwards when she swarmed hand over hand along the stick he was too bewildered to relinquish, and leapt on him, closing all her limbs around him. Whatever she was made of, it was far heavier than it looked. In seconds he was up to his waist in the mud, and sinking further. Clinging to the stick only dragged him deeper still. "I told you I'd go down with you," she said, just before it closed over the exorbitant growth of her toothy mouth. And the last sounds he heard were her triumphant breaths bubbling in the mud.
Whoa, that was
Thank you.
electric.
That was fantastic.
Can we talk for a moment about because we were just saying about opening lines, weren't we? And then
Oh, yes.
and then
Okay.
you opened with a fantastic line. And
Oh, thank you very much.
I love writing about how the weather changes and about how in particular how like light works in story, whether it's like
Yes.
that was a wonderful line. I think it was the dawn tried to prise up the basalt sky behind him.
Uh-huh.
It just worked. Like it somehow incredibly original way of saying that it's dawn right at the start. And
Thank
it
you
just
very much.
draws you right in. Loved it.
Well, yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Because they say never start with the weather. So
Yeah.
obviously I've just gone and done one of Elmore Leonard's 10 offences, clearly.
You should write a story that does all 10.
Yes, I'm sure I have actually at times. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I was in from minute one, but yeah, go on, Nico.
Yeah, the note that I wrote literally says the language is tiramisu rich. It was every mouthful of story was so complex and fantastical. You used the phrase quite early on. You said barnacled with dew, and it was such a fantastic pairing of natural language, but to bring that sort of seaside setting into just a description of some water on some metal that made it all feel so much kind of crisper and sharper in the mind's eye. It was absolutely wonderful.
Oh, thank you very much. I mean, well, I owe it all to Nabokov. I think when I was just turning 17, I discovered Lolita. I confess, this was back in when the hell are we? 1963, and it was. I have to confess, I bought it partly because it had the reputation as a naughty book, not quite. Well, it had been almost forbidden, but not, it got published in Britain, and I duly bought the paperback, and a couple of pages in, I thought, my God, this is so much more than I was expecting. Just this an astonishing sort of relish of language, kind of. As you say, almost a kind of physical tasting of language, and that's what he always recommended you as a reader to do, not just to his work, in fact, not especially to his work, but he used to lecture on English literature and Russian literature, and he'd sort of say, roll the words around on your tongue, basically, and that's what I loved about. Not merely that, but as soon as I'd finished Lolita, I bought everything else of his I could find, and immersed myself. And I was never the same again as a writer, I don't think.
Oh gosh, what like that's very early to have encountered something so formative that's persisted in writing career as well. That's really interesting. I just want to talk a bit about the characters for a moment because
Yes.
I love wry old ladies in books, in film, in TV, whatever it is. I just really enjoy that character because the sort of the matriarch is such a fascinating character. I think the way that they are, how culture is passed through and controlled between the generations, always fascinates me. So for her to be the sort of the villain in a way, the central evil in this story, really worked for me because I was completely obsessed by every single description you gave of how she was using her cane.
Yes.
From the first time with that elongated shadow, the one that I just physically recoiled from, you're talking about eliciting physical reactions from horror, was the splintering of the shells with her stick.
Oh yes,
because I could hear it, I could almost smell it, I could smell the beach. It was just sort of completely brilliant. Is the story called Stick in the Mud?
It is, yes, with hyphens as well. Yes.
Fantastic. So, to make it as she is she is Stick in the Mud, the will-o'-the-wisp. Yeah.
Indeed.
Gosh, that it's just really extremely well executed. And I know that probably comes as no shock to you, but that's
it comes as quite a shock. I mean, listen, let me tell you something. I mean, whenever I never really believe in this stuff. I mean, when I say believe it, I mean I never believe I've got it right, is what I'm trying to say. And I mean, specifically with a novel, I know this isn't a novel, but whenever I've completed a novel, if I done the final rewrite, off it goes to my agent, my great friend and great colleague John Jarrold. I always think he's either going to say, "Well, look, this is not what we expect of you. This is just not." Your thing, it's not working. Or he's going to say, well, you've repeated yourself once too often now. It's just the same old stuff, So, it's only when so far, he said, no, I like it, that he's just being kind, of course, then I think, oh, well, maybe it's some good after all.
So you mentioned John Jarrold there. One of our earliest podcasts was with a man called Chris Beckett, who you might know because he's also one of John Jarrold's.
Yes, I do.
I know him reasonably well, and we had a phenomenal time with him. So it's almost, it's been a long time since we've had one of John Jarrold's, writers on. But I think that was like season 2 or something, Nico, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it's very early.
First episode of season 2.
Gosh, it's very good. Yes, this kind of like mythic quality that you give her, that you begin to evoke from her, and it increases as it passes through. It just, as I say, it feels like it's just really, it's beyond competent. It's just the story breathes. It exists. It is true. There is truth in the story.
It's so good because this sort of spry old woman, walking faster than you can really keep up with, and full of far too much life. It's already kind of a mythological figure.
Yeah.
So for it to just shift sideways into, it's not just the ideal of old woman who's got too much gumption, into, oh no, this is a thing that's going to drown you in mud, it doesn't jar. It feels natural because you think, well, it was already something that was going to beat me anyway, because you can't beat old women.
You sounded like you regret that. You sound like you regret that you can't beat up old women.
No, not beat up. That's different. You can beat up old women. Glass jaws on a lot of them, I'm telling you. There was a line in it, and it is the kind of thing old women say all the time offhand. But was you can call for help all you like, no one would reach you in time. Actually, it really frightened me in the moment. Oh no, that's horrible. What a horrible thing. But it is exactly the sort of thing old ladies say.
The dialogue was killer. Like I wrote down a couple of little snippets because I just loved it so much. But it was the retired from life, that kind of wry joke that she makes about that. And then the other one that really got me was when he talks about being left alone, and she says, "I often am," and it's just, obviously there's extreme amount of pathos to that. Like I think you built on the pathos of being of a character being like an aging older woman, but never strayed from the fact that she is actually a monster, because that's also true. I honestly feel like I could quote half the story back to you, and but I think that might bore you. But the white blaze making the windows opaque, that combined with the way that he did the change in light, with the how he reasoned that he thought because of the change of the angle of light that the scenario had changed for him. As I said at the start, I love light in stories, so that really worked for me.
I think who was great at that is Joe Hill.
Joe Hill.
Yeah. Just in terms of that exactly the quality of light element, it very often turns up. I think particularly short stories. Actually, I've always liked that very much.
Okay, I'll have to look into that. If you've got any like particular recommendations, I'll happily go and.
Try his first collection actually. Oh Lord! Oh no! Here we go. Horrible moment. I forgot the title. What I'm doing as we speak is just looking, and I'm going to find the wretched thing if I can. Where are we now? Let's see. Types furiously. As furiously as I can at my age. Here we are. 20th Century Ghosts. 20th Century Ghosts is what it's called. And
Fantastic.
it's very good, very good.
It's gone on the list.
I've made a note of it as well. Yeah, it's just cracking story. I do like that whole like myth slash folk tale of travelers being led astray.
Yes.
It feels very rooted in history. Just how dangerous it would have been to travel up, a pre-electric light world,
Oh gosh, yes.
and things like that. Yeah, but at no point did this story feel like it was a foregone conclusion, though. As Nico said, sometimes it would be like quite easy to be like, oh, okay, something bad's going to happen to this guy. But rather than that, any feeling of that, you just are along with the character the whole time. And I have a suspicion as to why that worked for me, but I'd be fascinated to know whether this, like, how you constructed it on your end. But I think it might be because you built out the inner voice of the character, so
Yes.
that we get his reasoning. His
I
voice.
think I generally do that, even if
Yeah.
it's faulty. But I think you need to know why a character. I think that's the thing about you need. I need to believe in the motivation of the characters. I need to believe that's why that they would do this and that's why they would do it, and not just for some narrative contrivance. I need it to ring authentic, basically.
Yeah, I think it's a common criticism of the horror genre, isn't it? That characters do things that are seemingly nonsensical. Well, apparently there's a terrible spooky thing that's here. I shall go alone at night without a torch.
Yeah.
So giving justification.
Although, of course, having said that, you see, I don't know about you guys, but we might do that possibly if we in real life were told this place is haunted. Well, let's go and check it out then. Let's see if anything really happens, and that's not so impossible. Well, depending on how warped we are, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
so just on like the location.
Mm.
So I think I got that this was set in West Kirby. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes, that's
And
right.
this is a location that you know very well. It sounds like.
Yes, it's absolutely accurate. I mean, a lot of my stuff tends to go out of landscape, but particularly around Merseyside, not exclusively, but a lot. And it's the tip of the Wirral Peninsula. In fact, one bit of it at that end. And it is a seaside resort, and indeed there is that whole thing about being able to walk across to the islands. You can do it, but yes, you need to keep an eye on the tides. And actually, it's Robert Aikman who told us, Jenny and me, when we took him over there when he was staying with us many years ago. It was his thing about the tide comes in faster than a horse can gallop, because he'd obviously found this tradition somewhere, and it is the case, I think.
That kind of natural warning, that the natural dread almost of just the power of nature, just to snuff out a human if you're in the wrong place.
Very much so, yes.
Yeah, and obviously, I think in this story, I think it's constructed in such a way that that's initially the threat. That's the threat to the character, but then we later learn that there is a far more disquieting element going on, which builds wonderfully. I read one of your stories recently that was set in a Liverpudlian pub that was haunted by a Russian ghost.
Oh, yes. yes.
And I think that was written quite some time ago, and
it was 1980s, very early 80s. Yeah.
I mean, it really still works very, very well, I think. I think is it called Watch the Birdie? Have I got that right?
It is indeed. Okay, yes.
Yeah. So gripping, and that quality that I found gripping in that story exists in this. And I think it's really obvious that you've cultivated just extreme skill in this regard. And I've got a lot of respect for it. So thank you for reading it for us.
Oh, thank you.
I wonder whether we should start asking some interview questions.
I was going to say, I think if we heap any more praise on Paul Ramsey, he's going to get buried in it. So we'll have to try and hold ourselves back, Ben, because I know we could do this for some time.
Absolutely.
So we heard a little bit about some of your early inspirations, but who inspired you to start telling your own stories?
Well, I suppose it would have been my mother in a way when I was very, very, very young, because I was, I should say, I was saying I was reading Lolita when I was just turning 17, but I was hideously precocious. And by the age of about 18 months, I gather I was reading fluently. And certainly by the age of 6, my mother was letting me take books out of the local public library on her adult tickets. So, I was able to borrow lots of anthologies were my particular thing. And it's very probably the very first book I ever borrowed was an anthology from the 30s called 50 Years of Ghost Stories, which included M.R. James, included Henry James, actually, by gum, included Edith Wharton. So here I was reading Edith Wharton when I was 6, so I got afterward. But then which haunted me. But M.R. James actually was the guy who gave me waking nightmares for weeks on end, in bed once I'd read, it was The Residence at Whitminster particularly that got to me. There was one image in that where somebody is search. I can't remember what they're searching for, but they're opening a series of drawers in a chest of drawers, and the bottom one is just full of linen, and a little pink hand comes groping out. That's it. That's all. But it's enough. And the very fact it's a little pink hand, it's some sort of horrible claw, decaying claw. It's just rather an innocent thing in itself. It's just in the wrong place,
Yeah.
And with James, nowhere is safe. You reach under your pillow and there's a mouth under your pillow, that sort of thing. So that got to me on a very profound level. And I think around the same time, I can't, to be honest, remember her saying you should write. It may even have been the fact that I was aware that she wrote. Although sadly she was virtually never published, I think because basically, she was technically competent. She wrote a number of novels. Whoops, sorry about that. Good Lord.
Okay.
Shall I do that again?
No. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, let me go back. I think partly was that I was aware that my mother was a writer. She wrote a whole number of novels from sometime before I was born, actually, and carried on into through most of her life, but was never sadly published. I think because she was technically competent, but I think the books were already very dated. They read like popular fiction from decades earlier, and you really weren't going to be able to sell those to a publisher. But I think quite possibly my awareness of the fact that she did it made me want to do it too. And I began to write terrible stuff, believe me. But I still wrote Black Fingers from Space. There you are. That was a novel I started writing when I was 7.5 years old. John R. Campbell, age 7.5. There you are.
Good Lord.
But the thing is, here's a point. I was reading Edith Wharton, so my reading tastes, were horrendously mature. Wilbur Whateley had nothing on me, but the writing betrayed the age of the writer, even if the reading didn't. And I think that's always the case. Your writing going to betray your maturity, however well read you may be.
That's a great point. That's a truly fantastic point. So you're almost saying that being well read is one thing, but life experience is actually vital.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. So.
Did you ever become inured at all to those images that haunted you? Your little pink hands, or do you still shudder when you go in the living?
Well, they still give me a bit of a frisson, But I confess these days, I wish more got to me than does, because I suppose it's not merely knowing the methods, but I think I think inured is probably the right word. There are still things that do it. There are chapters in let me think. Adam Neville's novel, No One Gets Out Alive. There's a succession of chapters where the unlucky protagonist is making her way through this ghastly house, and there's there's a couple of chapters where she goes into a nightmarish room that's haunted. And then the one after that is worse still. It's like a nightmare that's never going to end. and he brings that off extraordinarily well. I find many of the films of David Lynch get to me on an absolute visceral level of
Yeah.
utter dread of anything can happen, but whatever it is, it's almost certain to be almost beyond bearing. And I think the most recent film, and now I've got onto film now, but the most recent film that really did do it to me pretty powerfully is The Moor, film by Chris Chilton, isn't it? Let me just check that as well to be absolutely clear. But I don't think that is the name. Let's see, typing again as I speak, and I think it is
Chris Cronin.
Chris Cronin. You are right. Have you seen it?
No, but I'm looking at it. I want to.
Oh, by all means! It's very much it's in the mode of the classical horror story, supernatural horror story. It begins in one way, and gradually you get the feeling more is wrong than the narrative has yet admitted, and the gathering of uncanny dread. I think second to none. Actually, I was very impressed indeed by that one. So highly recommend to everybody.
It looks like it's also got the legendary Bernard Hill in it.
It does.
As well.
It was his last film, I think.
Was it? Crikey, that was a. Yeah, I think we're all poorer for that one.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. So it sounds like obviously you've got a really good taste in film as well. But do you feel connected to a particular culture or subculture? And if so, do you feel it has noticeably shaped your writing at all?
Well, really, the tradition of the horror story, the great tradition, because that was one thing about when I was taking books out and then eventually beginning to buy them when I could afford it in paperback. Really, almost all you could find in the 50s were the classics. So, that was my education in the field. So Poe, Le Fanu, and Machen, Blackwood, Lovecraft wasn't easy to come by in those days. In fact, it wasn't until 1960 that I came upon what proved to be the very first British paperback collection of Lovecraft's stories. And as I say, there had been nothing until 1960, which seems extraordinary now, but wasn't the case then. And I was a little bit later. I was collecting. Well, also there was the fact that most of the horror anthologies that I was borrowing and later buying tended to be biased toward the literary end of the spectrum, and would draw upon often stories written by people who didn't necessarily specialise in it. Look at something like The Monkey's Paw, which is an absolute classic of the field. But it was only one of about a dozen stories, supernatural horror or horror stories, that W. Jacobs wrote out of several hundred stories that he wrote. And back in those days, and later on too, you get something like Graham Greene doing it. It wasn't regarded as being anything particularly odd or separate. They would just write these stories. They would be included in mainstream anthologies and collections. And this was what I grew up with. So really, yes, that's really what I feel part of most is that whole continuity of the field.
Do you feel like it's evolves during your career?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, people like Fritz Leiber, moved it forward in an extraordinary. I mean, Lovecraft. Well, I mean, obviously the pioneers, Poe, Le Fanu, Machen, Blackwood, and so forth. Lovecraft unites the American and British traditions, I think, and then Fritz Leiber comes along, and the crucial turning point, or one of the crucial turning points in the urban supernatural horror story, Smoke Ghost. Whereas previously, the everyday environment was invaded by the supernatural, but in that story, the everyday environment is the source of the supernatural, and that's an extraordinary turning point that has, I think, been an influence ever since.
Well, that's another one for my list there. Smoke Ghost. I'm going to have to read that as well.
Oh, you bet.
Does the sort of gothic and macabre follow you home? Do you have Is it all black curtains and faux spider webs indoors, or
Oh,
are
no.
you more cozy than that?
Oh, I think what about cozy? We've got a three-story Victorian semi here, and I'm speaking to you from the eminence, in fact, on the front of the third floor. But no, we're it's a house full of books, as you might well predict,
Yeah.
Yes.
and and of CDs, mainly classical, and of Blu-rays of every possible kind. Um, and so we'll probably be buried under the collapse of all those eventually.
Did you transition a VHS collection into a Blu-ray collection?
We did, yes. Or first of all
Yeah.
DVD, of course, but
Yeah.
then into Blu-ray, and now into 4K ultra high definition, and who knows what waits in the future.
I think it's important to be on the cutting edge of it, though, isn't it? It's
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, yes. I mean, I think the quality of the restorations is just astounding. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at what was I looking at the other day? Finis Terrae, a late silent film, which is about 100 years old. Photographically, it looks as if it was made yesterday on the new Blu-ray. It's just absolutely astounding.
gosh.
I mean, we watched 12 Angry Men this week, didn't we, Ben? Together,
Yes, we did. Yeah.
and the sharpness of a film
Yes.
shot in the 50s,
Yes.
using modern technology is it, like you say, it's breathtaking.
Yes, it is. Yes. Now, do you know though that there was a remake?
Oh, we were
Yes.
laughing. We were sort of laughing about it afterwards because we were like, "Why would you remake that?" But we saw that
Well,
in the 90s, right?
yes, but having said that, technically speaking, the Sidney Lumet film is itself a remake because the original 12 Angry Men was a television film, not directed by Lumet, with yet another cast. But then the new one, I think it's fair to say, it's pretty good. I mean, William Friedkin directed it, and you have Jack Lemmon in the Henry Fonda role. You have George C. Scott in the Lee J. Cobb role. And both of them are pretty splendid, and the cast generally is very good. And it is I think it is worth having a look at. I mean, just as I feel there may be a definitive recording of, say, I don't know, a symphony conducted by its own composer. But I don't think that really means we can't have other versions too.
Yeah.
And I think that it has sufficient individuality and power that it's worth checking out sometime.
Jack Lemmon in particular was an absolute juggernaut of an actor. Like, I remember the first time I saw Glenn Ross.
Oh yes, gosh,
and just
yes.
being ruined by the pathos of his character, like
Yes.
the panic that he infused and the desperation.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Something really special.
So,
Oh gosh, this does happen to us quite a lot. We love talking about film just as much as we love talking about
yes.
Well, it's storytelling, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, well, here, let me just throw one more into the mix before we well, maybe we don't leave it yet. But have you seen Beau is Afraid?
Beau is Afraid. That is well on my watch list. That is really high on my watch list. I've not seen it yet.
One of my favourite films of recent years, and I mean the best comedy of paranoia I think I've ever seen. I mean, he actually describes it as nightmare comedy, which, funnily enough, I've been applying to stuff of mine for quite a long time. So I feel a kind of affinity, But the first, I don't know, particularly the first section of Beau is Afraid. My gum, I wish I could have brought that off. It's quite something.
I really like Ari Aster movies because I've seen. I think Midsommar was one of his.
It was, and Hereditary.
And Hereditary, which I've heard is really good.
It is.
Hereditary is great.
Yeah. And I recently saw Death of the Unicorn, which is more towards the comedy end, I think.
Yes.
I don't know whether he just produced that one, but it's
yes,
a lot of fun. Ari Aster, I think, he's obviously at the top of his game.
Major talent, I'd say.
Major talent.
So when you're seeking out fiction for yourself, and we can keep film looped in here,
yes.
What are the themes that really speak to you?
Oh, I don't know about themes so much as just everything, you know. I mean, I seek out comedy, I seek out disquiet. If I can get them in the same package, or even, you know, indistinguishable one from the other, as does happen in Beau is Afraid, then I'm very much in my element. But I mean, I wouldn't say themes particularly. I would just say fields, but then pretty well all of those. I mean, I suppose I'm very fond of the comic novel. I'm very fond of not necessarily the suspense novel as such, but you know, novels with narrative suspense. But then, you know, what novel doesn't have that in some way? I suppose, you know, I would cite, for instance, I know I mentioned him before, Graham Greene, as a great favourite, and even when he's not writing what he called his entertainments, you know, he's still entertaining, and you know, something like the end of the affair, or the heart of the matter, or oh gosh, the power and the glory, you know, tremendous forward momentum. And I mean, those to me are the unputdownable books, or some of them. So, but themes, I have no special ones to seek out.
I think that's a wise answer. I think like themes aren't books. Books, you know, the feel of a book isn't defined by its themes. I think.
No, I mean, you know, for instance, yeah, I can talk about the themes of Moby Dick, but what
Yeah.
I really enjoy is the astonishing kind of, you know, narrative variation, richness. You know, the novel seems to explode in every direction, and you know, there's nothing quite like it. And you know, I read it on a beach in Greece, and as soon as I'd finished it, I wanted to start it again.
Have you? And you mentioned earlier that you like to write about the places that you know. Do you, when you say when you go on holiday to Greece or somewhere like that, do you typically end up writing a little short story or a book or whatever it is
Often,
about?
often enough, yes, often enough. I mean, 13 Days by Sunset Beach, which is a recent novel, that derives wholly from our Greek. We're very fond of Greek islands. We tend to go to one every year, alternating, but the various ones we come back to. And I have to say, I thought I would never write a vampire novel simply because I felt, you know, other people had said everything there was to say on the subject, but I actually came up with an idea that I thought, well, maybe that hasn't really been done. And also specifically, I wanted to invent a legend that might be Greek. And so I used a kind of amalgam of all the Greek islands that we'd visited, but more specifically, I tried to use every element of the kind of, you know, Greek tourism experience that I could, and just give them that little turn, and look at them again from a well, if you want, a macabre viewpoint. And I think it came off pretty well. I hope so. Anyway.
Fantastic. And do you have a preferred location that you like people to get your books from, like public libraries or particular bookshops or anything like that?
Bookshops all the time. Bookshops, please. I mean, you know, libraries. If you are impecunious, or you know, I can't expect people to go, you know, spelling out for every new book I do. But if you can, then I'd say a bookshop every time. Yeah, for sure. And in fact, when are we going out with this? By the way, let me ask.
I think fairly soon. Yeah, soon.
Well, because you see, if people are around Liverpool, I'm going to be doing Waterstones in Liverpool on the 20th of October.
Absolutely. Well, we'll make sure this definitely comes up well in advance of that.
Okay. And failing that, of course, if you're down in Brighton, there's the World Fantasy Convention, you know, at the Halloween weekend. And I shall be all over that program, apparently. So, you know, you'll not be able to escape me.
Absolutely. Well, we will be there, so we will.
You get all three of us for one if you come to that.
Very good, very good.
Yeah, we should probably note at this point we actually briefly met for the first time after the award ceremony last year. We were in a group photo together at the end. That was
of course, yes. Now it all comes back, even to my senile brain. Memory has not wholly failed me, after all.
Yeah, no, it was. We were. I think we were. It's the first thing we've won. So
renewed congratulations.
Thank you very much. but my point there is that like we don't remember it too well either because we went in a bit of a flurry of emotion, which was really lovely. What a community that is. Lovely.
It is indeed so.
Am I right in thinking that you had a hand in setting it up?
The
British Fantasy Society.
Oh, well, only in a very, very, very small way. I mean, I was kind of canvassing for some kind of. Initially, it was supposed to be a chapter of the British Science Fiction Association that would be, devoted to fantasy. But then some guys, Keith Walker, Dave Riley, Dave Sutton, others, Ro Pardo, they did the hard work of actually setting the society up. So it was all them, really.
Understood. Yeah. What's it like receiving like a lifetime achievement award?
Well, it makes me feel I should go on achieving. The last thing I want to feel is, oh God, well, I've done it now. Because if I don't write, then I get horribly frustrated and edgy, and you don't want to know me, believe me.
Well, I hope you do very much continue to win everything and write loads of good stories. I think it's an awesome outlook.
We'll occasionally email a writing prompt to you just to keep the demons at bay, I think.
Okay.
So just speaking about the career, like what have been the biggest changes so far that you've observed in the publishing industry during what is just straight up an illustrious career?
Well, I suppose really the proliferation of lots of things. Really. I mean, the proliferation of small presses, because back when I started, Arkham House was about it. So it was the huge leader in the field. There were Gnome Press and some others who had emulated them, but Arkham was in our field. I mean, the not merely the front runner, but the originator. And since then we've had, Lord, I think there was a time, particularly in the 90s, where horror fiction kind of sank, as it occasionally does. It went into a slump, and it was only the independent presses that were picking it up and keeping it alive. And luckily, they were certainly supporting a lot of talent, so that didn't die away. And of course, it was those talents were there to be rediscovered when the mainstream decided that maybe horror was something after all. And then obviously we've had e-publishing, which is well, as far as I'm concerned, it's a useful thing if you don't want to have lots of books in your suitcase when you go on holiday. But it's not a favourite thing of mine. I'd certainly rather have the object, the actual physical book. And then, of course, hugely the explosion of self-publishing. Which may have some merits, but I think sadly a lot of it, too much of what I see seems to be in need of editing.
Yes.
But there are instances of considerable stuff that is self-published, though again often enough that then gets picked up by the mainstream. So, but all these are outlets, and I suppose what mainly counts is that publishing is still vital. We can only hope that AI does not gobble it all up, which I don't think it will, because I think people are still going to value the human, no matter how much AI is out there.
Yeah, I mean there is a definite problem at the moment of AI-generated self-published books being flooded into everyone's favourite sort of, let's call them river-themed digital outlets.
Yes.
Do you think there's a solid route out of that? I mean, some of them have even been dangerous. These books that are.
Oh yes. I mean, there was one ghastly thing I saw. Not dangerous, just highly offensive to anybody with any sensibility, which was basically a sort of somehow the AI had got hold of Ursula Le Guin and was doing the Earthsea books, but changing all the names. And getting the language wrong, but you can still recognise enough of Le Guin there to know that's where they got it from. And so, in fact, I told her, the agent for her estate, and they have sorted it out and killed the wretched thing. And thank God it's been put out of its misery. We've been put out of ours.
So that's good. So we know that Ursula can lead the charge when we do go to war against the machines. That's can't be toppled by them.
That's right.
When it comes to your own work, do you have a personal favourite? Do you have your very best?
Well, on one of them, it's always the latest one. You always think, well, that because it's the closest to you in time. I think if I could, step back a little bit and get a bit of perspective, probably in terms of novels anyway, would be the trilogy. Searching Dead, Born to the Dark, The Way of the Worm. Um, because I think that has, the greatest scope. It was a long time in the making. It was quite a long time in the writing. It took me 3 years to write. But it was my old friend Pete Crowther at PS Publishing, who'd been, gently chivying away at me for some time, saying, that there's never really been a supernatural horror trilogy, and I ought to write one. Well, actually, there had been one back in the boom days of the paperback original. There's the Ghost House trilogy by Claire McNally, which I actually haven't read, though I have it here in a slipcase. Then, of course, Jeff Vandermeer came along and did the Southern Reach trilogy while I was working on mine. But, heaven knows there's room for more than one, so that's fine. But basically, I dallied for a long time over Pete's suggestion, because I always feel that, the only reason to write in a particular form, if there is a reason for it to be in that form. And so, as far as I'm concerned, a trilogy had to be more than just a very long novel chopped into 3 volumes. There had to be a reason for it to be in 3 volumes. And I eventually thought, well, supposing, we were to follow the main characters across probably most of their lives. We start with them, in childhood, then in their mid-adulthood, and then eventually in their elderly days. And as they develop and age, so too do the antagonists, who also the grow in family numbers and become more powerful. And it let me write, again, we're coming back to Merseyside, it let me draw very strongly on my memories of Merseyside in the early 1950s to the mid-1950s. So all that stuff is very authentic. But also, I wanted to write a cosmic horror trilogy, and I kind of like the idea that in the first volume this cult is very surreptitious, but by the third volume they're out in the open, and they've got charitable status, and they've got offices on the top of a tower block in Liverpool, because I have a horrid sense that would be how it works. And so that whole scope of the thing, and also I like following the characters and seeing them develop throughout the course of their lives, and surprising me in some ways of how they grew up. And so for all those reasons, I think that's my favourite. Yeah.
It sounds like part of why that might be your favorite. From what I just heard, might be that it sounds like it actually taught you something whilst you were writing it. Is that fair?
Well, I think all things teach me while I'm writing, because I always try not to preconceive too much. I always think that the actual, particularly the first draft is kind of a process of discovery for me. I always want to surprise myself whenever I'm writing a new story. Come up here to my desk, I want to write stuff I didn't know I was going to write till I wrote it. So, but yes, I think you're probably right to say that the trilogy had particular scope to do that, and it did.
It sounds absolutely brilliant. I'm just wondering what when you have sent that first draft off to your editor, whether it's off the trilogy or anything really, what is your editing process past that point?
Well, the first draft's always written longhand in exercise books, an old basic Parker pen. And I kind of tend to let that sprawl, if you like. I try to get as much of it right as I can, but at the same time, I'm increasingly aware that the rewrite is where the thing will be improved. So first draft, say it's a novel, say 5-6 months, maybe 4, 5, 6 months, and then I put that away for a while. Don't look at it again for some months, and I then reread it, which is probably the most dispiriting part of the process, because I can see everything that's wrong with it, but not how to fix it. But the fact is, once I see what's wrong with it, I know, I'm on the way to fixing it, even if I can't quite see how just yet. When I get to the rewrite, which is onto the computer, a completely different mindset comes into play. And, I delight in ruthlessness, basically. The more I can get rid of or rewrite or even just delete completely because I don't need it, the better. And everything's up for grabs. There was a time, you see, way back, sadly, when rewriting, I would try to salvage as much as I possibly could of the first draft. These days, I'll try to get rid of or improve as much as I possibly can. I only wish I'd, got into that state of mind sooner, because I look back at early stuff and think, oh dear, I wish I could redo that. But if I started, I'd never stop. And then eventually, well then, that having that rewrite that gets printed out, and I read through that one final time. Actually, that tends to go on holiday with us, because that's my sort of holiday work, which is the relaxed stage of the process. And there are always more things to be, tinkered with at that point, but it's largely complete. And then when we get home, I shall put in those corrections, and that finally goes off to my agent, and well, the rest we know.
The rest we know.
Yeah.
The point that you made about the rewrite and how dispiriting that is to read it, and in particular when you were talking about how you'd wish you'd learnt earlier that the goal isn't to salvage everything; it's to lose as much as possible and move forward. I wrote the first draft of something a while back now, and then last year I attempted to edit it, and I did exactly that. I tried to salvage every single sentence of that first draft, and my mental health went through the fucking floor because it was not good. It just was not good, and I ended up with a book, with something that was finished, and I sent it off. To publishers. It didn't go anywhere, but I know exactly why. It felt doomed. I felt like condemned to sending it off because I'd put so much time and effort into it.
Oh yes, I know what you mean. Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so that bit of wisdom sank right into my heart then. So thank you for that. I will next time.
I'm afraid I'm immune to wisdom, so for me, I'll just have to rely on Ben to improve through
it.
Oh, wow, that's incredibly useful. Thank you so much for that bit of insight. Gosh. This next one is Nico's favourite question, Ramsey. So I'm gonna leave it to him.
I can only apologise for it. Now, say hypothetically there were two writer podcasters, and they were being held hostage by a powerful and capricious magic user, is a bibliomancer, or a wizard of storytelling. This is, of course, hypothetical. And the bibliomancer is always on the lookout for new stories for his library. And so he sends these two poor unfortunates to find more books for his library. What novel is closest to your heart? Because it might just save our hypothetical hides.
Well, no, I was tempted to go for Nabokov, but I think we've spoken so much about Nabokov. I'm going to say, because the old notion of the desert island book. What book would you take with you to a desert island?
Yes.
And I've pondered that off and on for a while, and I think it would be. I'm cheating slightly, but not really, because I think, it has to be seen as a single work. So I'd say A Dance to the Music of Time by Anthony Powell. Now, technically speaking, it's actually 12 volumes, but they are collected as one. And the range of that is just prodigious. It's when it's being a comic novel, it's amazingly funny at its best. When it's being a sort of social observation, it does it extraordinarily well. But when it's being disquieting, there's this kind of very strange kind of insidious character called Widmerpool, whom we meet first of all in the first volume, where the protagonist and his friends are at boarding school, and he insinuates himself in and out of the narrative as we go on. He's not a conventional villain, but he's very disturbing, and certainly some of the effects he has are quite extraordinary. I mean, I'm just scratching the surface. I mean, I would say read the book, but it's an undertaking. But you'll be glad you did. At least I hope you will, because I most certainly was.
It sounds like it would take the bibliomancer a while to chew through it as well. So give us a bit more time.
We might get a whole week.
Yeah. That sounds fascinating. Have you ever considered? I don't know whether you have, but have you ever considered writing something on that scale? Because now we spoke about trilogies, but
no, I think the trilogy has exhausted my immensity. Yeah. I'm afraid.
I think 12 volumes. That you need some oomph for that.
I think so. Yeah, but he's got it for sure.
So, opposed to that question, my follow-up is: do you have an opinion on how organized religion is used inside the horror genre?
Well, it depends, I suppose. Well, actually, I suppose I could probably sum it up best by saying this, because the latest novel, An Echo of Children, which has just come out, and I've been known to describe it as the anti-exorcist, if you like.
Right.
It's my belief. Well, I think more than belief. It's my strong feeling, or whatever you want to call it, that attempts to exorcise children are a form of child abuse, frequently lethal and too often fatal. And while I think The Exorcist, the original Exorcist, and particularly the film we're coming back to William Friedkin again here, is a very, very capable piece of filmmaking, and it does work in its own terms. But I also think it's claptrap, medieval claptrap. I think what it at its centre is a kind of parody of adolescent rebellion. The Regan, she discovers her own physicality and sexuality. She becomes, she swears a lot. She gets rebellious, all this kind of thing, and she throws up, which some of us have been known to do because we drank too much when we were, too young. That kind of a thing, and it just seems to me to be a kind of monstrous caricature of adolescence in some ways. I certainly think it can be read that way. And what you don't need is then to bring along a priest who's going to, well, to be fair, they don't physically abuse her, but and the way the film plays. But at the same time, my novel attempts to counteract that view of things. It's very much about the dangers of the obsession with exorcism and the dangers of this whole notion of a child being possessed, which I think is disturbing in exactly the wrong way.
I think it is interesting because horror leans quite a lot on, especially like Judeo-Christian beliefs, when it's the evil thing is often just a demon of some variety,
in some way, yeah.
But is that? Do you think that's rooted in the sort of 1980s satanic panic still, possibly the way that horror cinema?
Well, there's a bit of that, but I think we go all the way back to Dennis Wheatley, and if you like, back to Bram Stoker. Where the Christian iconography is very much the saving power, the thing you use to oppose the evil. I mean, for me, it's far more complicated than that. I mean that a novel of mine, The Hungry Moon. It's about fundamentalism, which invades this village that has a druidic tradition in the Peak District, and actually doesn't solve anything. On the contrary, it wakens up what has previously been slumbering, and can't in fact overcome it.
Just so that I know, what iconography hurts Greek vampires?
Well, in my novel, not much.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Yeah, you have to make sure they don't have any delicious feta cheese
Well,
when they
that's
leap out.
right. That's right. As with Curly Howard in the Three Stooges, who was only was saved by the cheese in one. And I hope this gives me the opportunity to point out that I have written a book on the Three Stooges. So there you are.
Have you?
Oh yes.
What led you to that?
Oh, well, a gradual fascination with them, really. I mean, back in the 1980s when Channel 4 was just started, um, I mean, with Channel 4 in the days when they really were an alternative channel, and they were trying to do things other channels weren't. And they ran Three Stooges shorts in the early afternoons on weekdays. And a friend of mine who was a great fan of theirs and who thought they were superior to Laurel and Hardy, which I don't believe they are for a moment, but nevertheless, he said I should watch them, which I duly did. And to begin with, I just sort of found them peculiar. I didn't find them funny. I found them odd. But it's my theory, and it's one that I expound in this book, that of all the genres, for want of a better word, comedy is the one that needs us to adjust to its particular method in individual cases, before we can enjoy it. Each major comedian or comedy team, they have their own style, and I think in comedy more than anything else, we need to grasp that before we can enjoy it. I mean, sometimes it can be immediate. Often enough, it's not. And with the Stooges, with me, it wasn't. But gradually, I began to feel, I was still going back and watching them. So something was taking me back. And when Sony in America released all the short films from the 30s to the 50s in chronological order on DVD, I was sufficiently interested to buy them and watch them again. And I began to feel that, there is more here. And again, I come back to my good old friends at PS Publishing. In this case, it was Neil Snowden who runs and Guy Adams who run their film imprint, Electric Dream House. And they wanted me to do a book for the line. And I couldn't think of any film I wanted to talk about, at book length. And I eventually managed to persuade them I should do The Stooges. And just an overview of their entire output. And the more I looked, the more I saw. And the more I saw, the longer the book became. And the more I wrote the book, the more it seemed never to be finishing, because more would come up every time. And, rare films or supposedly lost films would show up online. And so it's still a work in progress. It's now in its third printing. And it's still expanding, and it may very well take over my life, if not the world.
It sounds like a right beast to be like continually expanding.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
I think so.
Do you think you might ever write something about Laurel and Hardy? It sounds like you.
Well, I who knows? Who knows? I mean, my feeling is about Laurel and Hardy. There have been several extremely good books, analysing their work. Perhaps not so much the Stooges, or maybe it's just I've not encountered those books, but there was sufficient there for me to feel is worth my writing about, and I do hope that I've come up with sufficient new insights to make the book worth reading. I mean, a lot of people have read it because I wrote it, you see, rather than because they were Stooges fans, but they've generally become more interested in the team having read the book, and that's all I want, really.
Brilliant.
Can I desperately request that in the next printing that you have a pop-up at the front of the book where a pair of fingers come out, so you have to put your hand up in the middle of your face to stop yourself being poked in the eyes. It's all I want from life now.
Absolutely. Well, we did think of putting in a little sort of sound effect. One of Curly's favourite things, but it turned out to be a bit too costly. So sadly, that was aborted.
What about there should be like a deluxe edition that does all of these things? It would be
absolutely. I think so.
Gosh, yeah. Just on the Laurel and Hardy thing, I moved around a lot as a child, but I spent a lot of time growing up in Cumbria, and in particular around the Elveston area, which is where Stan Laurel is from. And
Yes.
I don't know if you've ever been to it, but there is. I hope there still is, because it was quite decrepit in
The,
last time I was there.
the museum.
The museum, exactly. Yes.
Yes, and we not merely have we been there, but we were there with our son, who was then, he's now grown up and living in Singapore, but back then he was in his pre-teens, and you know they ran short Laurel and Hardy movies, and he was so amused by it that people were coming off the street to find out who was laughing and why he was laughing so much. So more power to Matt.
Oh, that's
Amazing.
awesome. That's lovely. Yeah, my granddad, they were my favorite. My granddad's favorite. Sorry. So I was always really into it, but I don't know if you're aware of this, but in rural areas, it's very difficult to get buses. Like if you miss one, you're waiting for an hour and a half, 2 hours, things like that.
Oh yes.
And so I was regularly like missing buses and being stuck in Elveston, and it was great because you could just go into that cinema and just watch as many Laurel and Hardy movies as you wanted whilst you were waiting for the bus. It was like a warm place to shelter and laugh. It was beautiful.
Ideal.
So, what is your next project? If you can talk about it, Ramsey. But what's the thing you're going on to next?
Oh, well, there's always so much. I mean, well, first of all, I mean, I've delivered a new novel called Ancestral, and that will be out, I suppose, about this time, next year. The idea there is of, the background is of a pair of rival occultists or, alchemists or whatever you want to say, many centuries back, well, quite a few, who attempted to do each other in by magical means, but only succeeded in calling up powers that they couldn't control, which do away with them. The families continue, and their descendants, eventually having been hostile for generations, come together, and eventually a young couple marries, have a young son. But the trouble here is that the hereditary memory from all that time back then it resurfaces in him, and he begins, however inadvertently, to rouse what was originally called up, and of course at his age not be able to control it either. So that's next year's novel.
That sounds exceptionally interesting. Like you had that pitch is brilliant. The this idea of the two rival alchemists. I love that concept. Gosh.
Yeah. I suspect I pinched it from Roger Corman, the Raven, but here's my take.
Oh, speaking of Raven, sorry, I don't think we talked about it after you read your excerpt, but there were some birds cawing in the background of your microphone whilst you were reading that story.
Oh,
and it added a really, really like just sort of level of immersion to it, which was really engaging. I leant forwards when it happened.
They were probably swarming inside my head, making themselves sufficiently apparent to be heard, I think.
As a man who loves sound design, it truly was nature just hitting the Foley at the perfect moment. It was fantastic.
Good.
So yeah, go ahead.
We have but one more question, Ramsey, which is where can people go to find out your news?
Oh, well, I suppose on Facebook they could look, on what we have to call X, I suppose, on Blue Sky. And also I do have an actual website, which I really must update more than I do. I'm a slothful old bugger me. But that is simply ramseycampbell.com. And I'll put... You've now poked me to remind me, so I'll put more news up there as I should.
Oh wow! Well, happy to have had an impact. That's wonderful. So I think the only thing that remains is just thank you for your time, thank you for your story, and thank you for your insight. This has been really not only fun for me, but also really I've learned a lot. So thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for having me. I had a good time too.
Listen carefully, Ben, because I think Ramsey might be secretly a cosmic horror. So if there's wibbly sounds before we turn the mics off, he's gone back to space.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne, and for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?